Hi guys, welcome to this episode of the Love of Science video series. I'm Reza and today we will examine the life story of one of the greatest scientists in history. Stay with us until the end of this video and subscribe to us so that you will always be the first to see our videos. Cars with the highest speed, launching various satellites into space, and advanced laser industries that we all are proud to be human when we see them are all the works that have been done based on the ideas of the genius of the world of science, Isaac Newton. The point that we should pay attention to is that new thoughts and ideas do not arise in a vacuum, and important components such as social, political, and cultural conditions governing the society have a direct impact on the formation of a creative thought. For this reason, we will first take a look at the conditions of the 17th century of England. Then we will examine the process and conditions of Newton's proofs. We will take a quick look at the scientists of his time who made the way for scientific work easier with their comments. And finally, we will express Newton's thoughts and theories in a general way. In the 17th century, England went through turbulent years in social and political fields, which began with the reign of James I in the first years of the century and ended with the revolution of 1688 and 1689 and the dismissal of James II. In this century, business and economy grew a lot in England, and the middle class grew significantly compared to the previous century, so that 50% of the people were either rich or had decent wealth, and out of the other 50%, only 20% were very poor. In this century, England faced the plague 3 times, and in each epidemic, a large number of people died. Despite this, the population grew rapidly in this century and reached 52 million people from 4 million people. It was in this condition of England that Newton was born on January 4, 1643, in Woolsthorpe in a farmer's family with little wealth, while he had lost his father shortly before. His mother's genius did not stay with him for long and left him after his remarriage, and Newton spent most of his childhood years with his grandmother. Isaac had a hard road ahead in his studies. The biggest challenge was that trying to turn the genius into a simple farmer was more than trying to turn him into the greatest genius of history. But attempts to turn him into a simple farmer failed, and Newton prepared for Cambridge at the King's School in Grantham. Isaac Newton went to Cambridge in 1661 and passed the classical curriculum offered at Cambridge, but his side studies were extensive in the field of philosophy. 1665 was a terrible year for English society, the year the Great Plague killed many people, and as a result Newton returned home with the closing of Cambridge. This return gave Newton an opportunity to think deeply about his theories. Probably during this period, the apple that inspired the theory of gravity fell. 2 years later, when Newton returned to Cambridge, no one thought that the most important laws in the history of science would be formulated by him. Designing the first telescope in 1668 was Newton's first step to prove his genius. In the following year, Newton was given the Lucasian chair in Cambridge, and he was the first person after Isaac Barrow to get this position. After him, people like Dirac and Hawking were able to reach this rank. The Royal Society, which has been one of the most important institutions that have influenced the progress of science, requested Newton to display his telescope there in 1671. The following year, Newton became a member of this organization and published his finding on optics. In 1984, one of the most important meetings in the history of science took place, where Edmund Halley met Isaac Newton and convinced him to organize and publish his finding about the elliptical paths of celestial bodies. These results were published in the book of Principia in 1984 and established the laws of motion and the universal law of gravitation. This book introduced Newton into intellectual circles as a genius. The genius of the world of science did not have only scientific activity. Newton opposed James II's efforts to establish Catholic teachings in English universities and was one of the companions and causes of the 1688 revolution in England. With Hooke's death, Newton assumed the presidency of the Royal Society and published the additional results of his studies on optics, which greatly influenced the scientific studies of the following centuries. Newton's extraordinary works in the field of science prompted Queen Anne to knight him. One of the topics that should always be taken into account in science is the readiness of society to express scientific ideas. Newton lived in an era when great scientists such as Robert Hooke, Galileo, Pascal, Kepler, Robert Boyle, René Descartes, and Jacob Bernoulli prepared the world's atmosphere to accept scientific theories. Newton's scientific opinions led to the production of scientific methodology. Newton is at the center of the scientists who caused the scientific revolution, and according to Einstein, Newton's work is the foundation on which modern physics is built. Newton never married and spent the last years of his life with his niece near Winchester, and finally the genius died on March 31, 1727.